Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Conscious Health podcast with my co host, David Ortega. Welcome, and we have a very special guest with us today, Amritha, and I'm just going to quickly read out your bio because I am super excited because the name of this episode is How to Calm Your Inner Chaos, and I'm so excited to talk to you about this. So she's an author, a life coach, expert in the Bhagavad Gita, and a Sanskrit instructor. Amrita inspires her audiences to bring calm to the workplace and home. She offers her audiences practical methods to cultivate self-discipline, emotional intelligence, and a life of confidence, peace, and harmony. Her lived experience of overcoming childhood abuse and 10 months of being bedridden deepened her appreciation for the healing power of ancient wisdom. Wow, that's a lot. Your journey has been quite interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how you got to that space of learning how to calm your inner chaos?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much, David and Natasha, for inviting me to your powerful podcast. I'm so honored to be here. And definitely, I'll be open to sharing with you how I got to this place of being able to overcome my inner chaos. It all happened 15 years back when I was working in a multinational company and I was a new mom. I had a 1 year old baby and was actually in chaos, not knowing how to manage work and home. So I was trying to balance both of these together and was going through a lot of emotional turmoil with like anger, guilt, and shame, and all of that stuff. And what happened was like I did not know how to actually manage this. And I was suppressing this, thinking that nobody's going to know about this, and just carrying a smile on the outside would just make everything easy. But what I realized was like day by day, this was becoming heavier and heavier. And I kept going with the same routine without doing any kind of self care practices or anything at all. So this went on to a point where I started noticing physical symptoms in my body and started having pain starting from my back. So I started having severe back pain. And what I did was I took some pills to kind of suppress the pain and then again continue to go to work. But it was not the work that was actually causing all of this. It was the turmoil inside that was causing the inner chaos that was actually causing. But I didn't know it at that time. And I went consulted a lot of physicians to find out what was happening. By the time I actually reached out to my physician, it had actually got to an aggravated stage where I was diagnosed with acute cervical spondylosis. And the worst part then was that 5 out of 7 vertebrae in my neck was in a very bad condition. And at that point, the situation was that I had to go into a spine surgery. That was the solution that was offered to me. But you can imagine a lady in her 28 years old would not be in a position with a 1 year old baby to go into that kind of a place, right? So me and my family, we were looking for what else can we do at this point to kind of recover. And that's how we started looking for alternate therapies. And I was guided by one of my family friend who was called Sangeet Uncle. He actually referred a naturopath expert who was a spiritual master too. So I was guided to him and then started working with him on a treatment plan. And then that took around a year for me to actually recover. But what I noticed throughout this process was that this was not an easy journey for me because lying on the bed with the pain, kind of like crucial, I would call it like so painful, which is like feeling like thorns are like pricking you on your back, right? And that
Yeah.
kind of pain was not something that you could just deal with it. And I feel that that painful place taught me a lot of lessons, especially in terms of recognizing how important it is to take care of my body, first of all, and also take care of myself if I have to run a family, if I have to work effectively effectively or efficiently, I need to be healthy, just not with my body, with my mind as well. So I understood the
Mhm.
connection between my mind and body at that time, and understood that if I still continue this inner chaos, this is going to take me to more difficult places. So that was the turning point in my life, where I started reflecting and rethinking about the way I was living at that point. Yeah. And since then, I started changing everything from my routines, my eating habits, my discipline in terms of my spiritual practices, all of that. So I started reconsidering how should I actually go about living. And that's when I started reading the Bhagavad Gita. And this actually did not happen instantly. I was guided through a spiritual master who's called Sri M. So Sri M actually guided me in this journey towards spirituality, where I started looking into Bhagavad Gita for solutions, and I found powerful techniques out there which I implemented as an experiment to begin with, but later on started seeing changes within my own mind. That's what I noticed first. I didn't notice anything around me change, but within me I started having more awareness, and I became more aware of my noisy inner chaos, which was the ultimate problem for everything that was manifesting in my life. So I started working through that inner chaos, bringing in self control, self awareness, self discipline. All of these practices together helped me to get to a point where I was able to get to a place of clarity. Yeah.
What a beautiful journey you've been on, even though it was quite painful, literally a pain in the neck, to get through that, for sure. And there's so much to unpack there, which is beautiful. And I love that spirituality guided you, because that for me was also quite true, in the sense of when I hit that space of burnout.
Yeah.
I was very lucky to have grown up in a family that had a lot of spiritual principles, which I just ignored because they just weren't accepted from the outside world, really. And it was like, I'll still be spiritual, but in my everyday outside life, I'll just be normal, kind of a thing. And when I hit that stage of burnout, I was like, oh, I need to get back to. I'm like, my chakras are blocked. Like, there's stuff that I need to start working through. And then that reawakening of that journey started to move through. And I started to realize as well that, like, yeah, the body is usually the last protocol. And we've spoken about, David and I, on the show quite a bit, that when something manifests in the body, it's because it's been lingering somewhere in the mind. And not to mention as well, and emotionally, but I work within the Akashic records a lot of the time, but it's amazing how people's journeys, like especially going through trauma, informs a lot of our passion and our purpose later on in life, right? It's that turning point and how we approach that. And I love how you talked about having that discipline of mind, because you're right. I think it was Einstein that said that doing the same things and expecting a different result is madness, right? And I think
Yeah.
we tend to do that. We'll just do it a little bit harder, we'll do it a little bit faster, we'll do it a little bit longer, we'll do it just a little bit more, and things will change. So, and also with children, I mean, all three of us are parents. I remember sitting in my car before walking into the house, just taking like 2 minutes to just be, before hitting the chaos of being at home. And those roles that so I've come off. I'm now not a marketing manager anymore. I'm putting on the hat of mom, and then I'm putting on
Right.
the hat of wife, and then I'm putting on all these hats on, all these masks on. How does one get to that space of kind of like that 0 point where you get to just be you for just that little bit?
Yeah.
So yeah, what were some of the disciplines that you put in your mind to? I mean, that takes a lot of courage. I mean, we talk about burnout, but it's not like I wasn't bedridden, so I can't imagine how you must have felt to have to rely on a lot of people. And I mean, that is quite a humbling experience, I think, in that sense, where it's a total surrender to
Yeah.
allowing others to take care of you. So that must have been quite big in that sense. Well, I'm
Yeah.
assuming.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was
How did you
huge
find
because,
that?
yeah, I found it, I would say it was bringing a bit of shame to me, being
Mm-hmm.
young and being having to depend for the smallest things, like even
Mm.
brushing your teeth, you need someone's help, was actually bringing a lot of shame to me. And I, being a person, like my values are in terms of like having like most of them, I want to be independent. I don't want people to do things for me. And I believe there was a part of ego also stepping there, which is like, why do I have to be in this place? Those were the kind of questions that were running in my mind. But that was bringing again pain for me. I truly feel grateful for having my husband, my mother by my side to support me.
Mm.
But at the same time, I was not wanting to actually be in that place forever. That was the kind
Yeah.
of place that I was in. And that's where I'm bringing in the importance of values, because the values of determination and surrender actually helped me a lot at this stage. Because if I, as you said, if the surrender was not there, I would not have seen the path forward in front of me. And the determination was very much strong in me that I don't want to lie down like this. And
Mm.
it's my mom who actually helped me to remember about that value, because she saw me lying with my eyes full of tears, and she told me, like, do you actually want to stay like this forever? And that question made me reflect on my values as to, no, I don't want to stay like this. I don't want to give up. And that actually brought me to this place of thinking about how do I discipline my mind. And the first thing that I
Mm.
noticed was there was a lot of anger, as I said earlier, like, why should I be in this place? Why should I be the one who's suffering? Those were like the predominant questions. But when I started focusing more on my mind with the help of Bhagavad Gita principles, what I noticed was when my mind was calm, things around me were calm. When my mind
Mm.
was in this place of inner chaos, every person I interacted with also led to a place of like conflict or some kind of chaos there. So every person I met, every situation I was in was bringing in the same energy of chaos. And even my work at home, whether I'm doing a chore and I'm carrying this chaos, the chaos was reflecting in that work as well. So I noticed this when I actually came back from work one day and I was sitting with terrible inner chaos happening in my mind. And I was like, how can I actually solve this? This is what I was going through. And I told my husband and my mom, I don't know how to actually deal with this difficult situation that's happening. And they listened to me very patiently. They consoled me. Everything was happening. But inside, it was a turbulence. And that's when I sat with myself and reflected. And then I noticed that the mind needed something to calm down. My mind needed something to calm down. And at that point, this reflection brought a very powerful question before me as to who is suffering here? This was the question that was brought forward during that reflection. And that profound question made me understand it was just my mind. It was just my mind. And following to that, I started giving more attention to my mind than to the people around or the situations around. And the one of the disciplines that I did was like to first check in the state of my mind before I even talk to someone or before I carry out any activity during my day. Because if mind is not good, nothing is going to be good. So that's how I brought in this discipline to check in with my mind and then cultivate practices like self awareness, cultivate practices to regulate my emotions and my thinking in order to be able to get to that state of peaceful mind that is efficient enough to be able to go out into the world and then be used for different purposes. Yeah.
I was curious for many of the emotions that you have mentioned, Amrita, and the one that I think that I you haven't mentioned it, but I'm thinking, I'm assuming that is the one that mostly for women and for men, work against us is guilt.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
Mm.
and that's the first emotion I think that propels us to go into overdrive and to get into this burnout syndrome and do things because we feel judged by first by the role of the society that they assign us, second by the patterns that we follow from our parents, and third by the expectation that we think that other people are
Mm.
uh, having from us. So what of those emotions, or if these emotions were present in you, drive you to that level of pain, and how could you detect your mind after, of course,
Yeah.
the kind of thoughts that you were having? Because I think that can be very helpful for people to recognize the kind of thoughts
Yes.
and to step aside a little bit. No?
Totally, totally. And you're right, bang on, David. It is the guilt that actually kind of makes you, I would also not say it as makes you, chases you to a point where you feel like you're not doing enough. That's how it starts. It's like, I'm not doing enough. I'm not a perfect mom. I'm not a perfect employee. So these kind of questions, the self doubt, the guilt following to that, and then you try to please others. I was in that place. I was pleasing others. I was doing more than what was required. In spite of me burning out on one end, I was doing more to just make sure the other person is happy and cared less about me. So the guilt was actually, as you said, it was the fuel that was driving me to do all these things. And there was no end to it. I noticed that this is kind of a spiral wheel where you just get caught and there's no end to this. And this physical suffering was in a way for me to understand that I need to stop doing this. So when noticed, like I said, that point where I was feeling exhausted, I was feeling tired and drained in energy. That was the way I was, like every day when I came back from work. That's how I was. And this is with no complaints about the people at work or anything. It was just my head or my brain creating things which were like right
Mm.
now I can definitely say there were like lots of stories, self directed stories that were causing this kind of turmoil. And that's what I believe most often happen in many of our lives, where these are narrations or creations of our own mind. And what happens is we always want to protect ourselves. And one way of protecting ourselves is in the form of guilt as well, which is like, I'm a victim. I need to get all this and I need to be treated like this and all that. And there's nothing wrong when it comes to self love and self care. But what I'm saying is like victimizing yourself to a point where you feel like there's no way out and your life is just going to be like this. So one of the ways to understand is when you get into this place of listening to these kind of statements that show up, which is like, oh my God, look at my life. What has happened to me? I can't do enough. There's nobody who's recognizing me, nobody appreciating me. And all of that stuff is what I believe fuels towards this path of inner chaos. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting how we develop this dialogue
Yeah.
inside of us that is completely mixed up with opinions from many other people, and of course our parents are there speaking about many
Yeah.
things, and we saw also that example from them, from either our mom or our dad. We saw that they went into those places of being neglected of what they
Right.
needed. And nowadays we have come to a stage where giving us that pause and that time to reflect is necessary, and is
Yeah.
something that we look for. Is not something that we feel now ashamed of.
Yeah.
Now it is easier to recognize and to say it, although very old generations still have a conflict with that. No, but
True, so true. Yeah, and it actually reminds me about how perfection is one other way where, like, you
Mhm.
hear certain criticism, like you said, like from our own parents or from our own family members or from our friends, and we personalize it so much to actually get into the place of this perfection, being that perfect person who can actually meet that identity or the image that has been created. And that would definitely lead us to a place where we get into this place of burnout again. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That I think perfectionism has a place in a sense of, okay, if I have a surgery, I would like that to be done as most perfectly as possible in that sense. But I think also a lot of the times we forget that perfectionism for me, and this is only my opinion, a lot of the times we are taught to be perfect, and it's perfectionism is, like I said, for me it's a state, and it's a glass ceiling, because one can't improve on perfection. It's like, and it's that space of, we're always in progression of where we were. And yes, I agree, it's like trying to do the best that we can and step into that space of highest potential. Like you say, let me check in my mind and let's see, am I in this space of, moving through something in the best? And it's so interesting because even if we look at that space of perfection, people have different expectations of what perfection is from us. And it's hard because we're trying to fit into all of those instead of realizing that we are perfect exactly as we are. We're in the space of progression because nature does not make mistakes. There isn't a flower or an animal that is imperfect. Why would we be?
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting in that perfectly imperfect, and it's those imperfections that make us interesting. Imperfections according to whom, you know, are the things that make us the perfect person for who we are. And it's that space of progression that comes in. And I love how it's so interesting because of the words that you said, in the sense of, I'm not being seen, I'm not being heard, and it's all throat chakra, which was
Yes.
all your neck is
Yes.
there. It's like basically going, come on,
Yeah.
just express yourself, say no,
Yeah.
whatever it
Yeah.
is that's
Yeah.
coming in there, how it all manifests in the same spaces. I mean, your foundation, your core of who you are, and women should do this, and it comes in very different cultures in the sense of you needing to put everybody else ahead of you, and then it's you. And it is, these things show up for us because you have absolutely no ultimatum but to choose you in that moment, um,
Yes.
which is beautiful. And the overthinking is
Right.
that thing, because we are so used to criticizing ourselves constantly. I remember I used to do that. I used to wake up in the middle of the night replaying conversations that I had, and then we're so creative because then I start
Yeah.
seeing other things that are there, and then I start to believe that those things are true, but it's all in our minds, at the end of that.
Yeah.
One of the tools that I used to reprogram my brain was to use affirmations in
Mm-hmm.
trying to and I used to go to sleep with them. And I started turning that into a habit, but I recorded my own affirmations because somebody told me,
Yeah.
you never know how people are subliminally, brain, especially if you're sleeping, reprogramming your brain. So I was like, okay, I'm
That's
doing
so
this
true.
myself,
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then another truth about that is there was a stage where I was so exhausted, I'd put on the TV to relax and I'd fall asleep. And then once I started realizing, I was like, what am I watching? What has just been programmed into my subconscious in front of the TV? I was like, oh, not doing this again. I don't watch a lot of TV these days, but the overthinking aspect, so the back into those affirmations. So if I did wake up in the middle of the night, I would just play the affirmations in my
Yeah.
own voice, and it would start to help me fall asleep. What were some
Right.
of the tools that you did to reprogram
So
your mind?
the most effective tool that I started off was with positive self-talk,
Okay.
which is like, and that's where Bhagavad Gita came into
Mhm.
my help, I would say, because it was like being able to detach myself from my mind,
Mm,
understanding that, and I understand at this point, whatever happened for a reason for me to
mm.
understand this, to be even able to share
Yes.
this today in your podcast. Yeah. So being able to detach that what is happening, the chattering, it's my mind and it's not me. So that detachment in terms of understanding that from a spiritual background, this is you are the higher self, or you are the Atma, or you're called the soul, which is completely divine. And it's not the one that actually chatters or makes noise. So being able to disconnect and detach by looking at the mind, and when these thoughts came in, just observing it and then looking at it as if it's your child. That's what I did. Looking at it
Mm,
as if it's your child and talking to it and saying, come on, I know what you're saying. It's all okay. I hear you. Just like I would talk to my girls. It's like, yes, I hear you. And allowing it to be present there, allowing it to be present and giving it all the time and attention. What was surprising to me during that time is just being with it kind of dissolved it, because once we bring ourselves to the present moment during that observation process, it has no relevance. Like it fades away,
mm,
because there is like anything, if it has, like, if it comes as a thought, and then if it is a valid thought, then it should be relevant in the present moment. What
mhm,
comes in, if it's not relevant in the present moment, it has no values, what I think. So the process that I followed was bringing in more attention to look at my mind. Follow to that, I was paying attention to the narrations that were happening, and then taking the time to actually sit with it and say, yes, I hear everything that you're saying, but unfortunately, some of these statements are not true or relevant in the present moment. So, this kind of like analysis without judgment helped me to kind of come to a point of understanding that most of these can be like navigated through, like just with bringing
mhm,
in detachment. And there's another principle called in Bhagavad Gita as viveka, and this is discernment, which is like being able to analyze your own thoughts and saying, is this something that's true or is it something that's cooked up? Yeah.
Yeah, I you remind me. Well, I have been thinking about the the sessions of therapy that I'm having nowadays and discovering my own story with the analysis of detachment and discernment of
Yeah.
seeing myself as a child.
Yeah.
And there was a very powerful exercise that I did, reflecting on my own self and the things that I didn't receive first when I was a child, and second, those things that I didn't receive as a child but I needed are the ones that nowadays as an adult drive me to prove something, to sometimes create that chaos, to replicate the system that I
mm,
have, and to create again all the scenery that I have, no, all the things, and that's why many times we are attracted either to jobs that drain us or to people that drain us,
Yeah.
or we start being lured to these kind of interactions where we need sometimes that chaos. So in your own case, you also mentioned in your bio that you had something in your childhood. So how did
Yeah.
you work with that, or how did you learn about your past?
Yeah. So it was mostly the past actually shows up, as both of you know, in the present in different ways. Like it determines your personality also, right? So a lot of my personality was influenced from the childhood experiences. And that's what brought in the self doubt, this part about having to please others and have. I would call it like craving for appreciation and all of that stuff. It came definitely from the childhood experience where a child was looking for that appreciation starting from their parents. That's where the place comes in, right? Starting from their parents. When they don't receive it, then they look for it from their teachers or from their friends and all of this. And as we grow, it then goes to expecting it from people around you in your workplace and other places, right? So definitely it stemmed from my childhood. I was brought up in a family where like I had a really good spiritual background, and as you said, Natasha, my grandparents were highly spiritual. My mother was highly spiritual, and my dad was also someone who was currently spiritual, but they did not know how to actually go about parenting. That's how I look at it at this point, which is they did their best they could to bring up their children, but they did not know that they had to spend time with their children. They had to recognize certain things that the child has in terms of talents and all of that. They provided me opportunities like definitely sending me to school, giving me opportunities to learn a lot of things like music and all that stuff. But they failed in places which they themselves did not know. The failure was in terms of like criticizing the child as it's growing up, saying like, you know what, this is not how you're expected to behave and all that stuff. And I, at this point, would say like, I think it's kind of present in many of the parents that even I meet today. It's something that has a contribution from the culture also that I belong to, which is like that expectation that only if you reach a particular standard, you are considered to be good to actually fit into the society's standards, right? So they are trying to actually make you the best so that you don't have to struggle or suffer when you are actually put out into the world. But their good intentions sometimes actually burns us down. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
that's
is.
how I see it,
Beautiful.
David. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And one of the other things that I'm totally into is ancestral lineage. Why do we choose these parents? You know, kind of a thing, knowing that in their imperfections, they are the perfect parents for us to get us to where we need to be.
Yeah.
And I think that that is always changing. Like my daughter will say, like, I'm going to be a better parent than you. And I'm like, I hope so. Because like I do the best that I can with what I know, and hopefully you'll know better later
Yeah.
on, which is quite interesting. But I think we've also got a lot more resources open to us
Oh,
as
yes.
well now
Yes.
in doing a lot of the research and the understanding. Like I remember when I was even in Calgary, we attended this lunch, this charity lunch, and it was this I can't remember who the organization was. It must have been probably about 5-10 years ago, and they help especially young girls that are going through quite a lot of turmoil in cutting themselves and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that conversation, they really had like somebody come in and talk about the younger years. And they said to us, like, you know, it actually is quite healthy in the sense of having conversations where you're disagreeing with each other,
Yep.
having that argument. And that was one thing that it was just like I never, like my parents are divorced and I never saw an argument in my house
Yeah,
ever.
and that's exactly the place, Natasha, where I was, which
Mm-hmm.
was thanks for bringing that point. That's very strong because at this point, like David and Natasha, you all would also agree where currently our relationships with our spouses are much
Mm,
more matured, where we can talk to each other and come to an agreement on things that
that's
we
it.
on as well, right? But my environment was where there was relationship conflicts between my parents,
Yeah.
and whenever I stepped as the person in between, I would be just smashed in between. You can imagine. So I became then the reason for the conflict. So it was
Mm.
so difficult as a child who's like a toddler to kind of like bring this relationship to a place of agreement, right? As a 2 year old,
Yeah.
you cannot step into that place. And even when you grow and you're trying to bring in harmony by trying to reduce this conflict, you get into this place where you are then the victim, right? So I was in that place of victim, and like just raising my opinions was kind of physically
Mm,
shown as a way of not doing it. And that's where I feel there is an influence of the culture also, because
mm,
the culture where I was brought up, there are a lot of good things with the culture, but at the same time, there was a place where raising your voice as a girl was considered
mm,
something you're not supposed to do. And so that kind of influenced to a point till I became an adult. So there were a lot of traits, as you said, David, that actually became
mhm,
a pattern and started showing up in my adult life and started bringing me suffering. And now things are in a better place where we all have that kind of maturity to understand this is not the way to live. But unfortunately, we can't change everyone, and that's where like you can only forgive at this point for whatever has happened, and you can't change your past. So that's how I look at it at this time. Yeah.
Yeah, it is so funny how we choose emotions that
Yeah.
we saw in our childhood, and we use them to protect us many times. Because going back to what happened also to me, the anger was an emotion that I saw a lot of times in my home, and I also was in the conflict of my parents, and many times that was, I think, the most common emotion, anger. So I saw that anger was an emotion that you could use to set up your boundaries and to start creating
mm,
a healthier life, or to be respected, or to be
Right.
uh, let's say, to be heard many times. So
mm,
that emotion for me has been an struggle sometimes, because it is good to have anger at certain points, but if you leave it to go up, then you can damage other people. So that's one, and the other one is the love, or the affection that we didn't receive, and we crave for that. And you said it also, that we look at it also in teachers. And I was having that session of therapy, and my therapist asked me, where did you look for that? Because I think that you didn't receive it from your parents. And I told her, I look for it in my teachers, usually female teachers, because from my mom I didn't receive those
Yeah.
emotions. From my dad I didn't even care. But from my mom I didn't receive that, and I looked for female teachers. So we usually crave that. And in the case of women, what I see the pattern is that people pleasing, you know.
Right, right, right. And that's such a strong point that you said the emotion that stood out for you was anger. In my case, it was fear. Fear of
mm,
like physical like blows or whatever, because that was like a survival instinct, I believe, at that time, which is like, I need to protect myself, otherwise I'll be like smashed down or something like that as a child. And that fear still remained till I grew up. And that was the strongest emotion that started showing its different colors in different ways, like guilt and self doubt and all of that stuff. Yeah.
It is so
yes.
interesting how one emotion, each one of us has, as a, let's say, as a source of the other ones, no? Because, and then you can explain why, as an adult, you defend yourself in certain ways, or you create certain environments to be safe,
Yeah.
so that you can regulate more that emotion, no?
Right, right. And as
Mm,
Natasha earlier said, which is like this ancestral pattern or lineage that we carry, it's so beautiful in that way that sometimes the people who actually are the victims become the people who actually speak for it, which is what I see. Probably you both can also relate. I see that strongly in my life, where today, when I'm actually coaching women who have been in these places, I am able to actually understand their feelings and empathize with them more strongly because I was in that place. And I believe there is, as you said, Natasha, there's a very strong reason that you are brought into some kind of a family circle where you have to
Mm.
go through all this. Yeah. Mhm.
Absolutely. I want to ask a question just from a different perspective on chaos. So these are chaos that we used to that are everyday lives. Like, so I'm in Portugal. I came to a spiritual summit this week, so doing also a lot of internal shadow work within myself. But when I got here, the day after I got here, there were these massive electrical power outage through the whole Portugal, the whole of Spain and France. No electricity, no internet, no nothing. And it was quite interesting from that phase because I see there's always a good thing and a bad thing as it comes to it. One, the amazing part of it was I don't think we actually realize how noisy that whole energy of electricity is going all the time. The other one was that how connected we are in that sense of if we were disconnected with, I mean, internet was communication out and in, it was just like, oh my goodness, especially because my children are in Scotland right now with my mom, and I was like, I need to let them know that I'm okay, and we don't know how long this is going to last for. But on the other side is that people were outside and kids were playing and people were talking and nobody was on their phones and all sorts of things like that. So there is that benefit of that. But the reason I'm explaining this is within myself, because I can only really observe what's going on. Yes, we went to the shops to go get water because we didn't realize how long it was going to be. We didn't have water here, but it wasn't like a panic. It was just like, let's go. And there were some people that were just like, oh, I'm just going to grab a couple of, because it was like, whatever, I'm fine. And other people were like, oh my God, back to that whole COVID kind of like energy. And it's so funny because I find myself going through chaos even within my own life at the moment. I find myself in a neutral spot, in a 0 point, when this chaos is happening around me. It's this new thing for me that I've started coming into space with, of absolute, like you say, observation rather than the chaos or whatever it may be. And it's like, let's just get through this. But there is no emotion. And it's not that I'm emotionless, it's just that there's an observation to it, which I'm finding it's awesome. But it's also kind of like, should I be feeling stuff? I'm used to feeling stuff. Should I go into the panic? Shouldn't I go into the panic? What's the right thing to do right here? Because, and it's quite interesting because it's like, no, this is the neutral point when this chaos is happening. What are your recommendations for when chaos is happening around you that you cannot control in that kind of environment? I mean, we can only really control ourselves, but what is your advice for that?
So that's a beautiful story that you shared, and it's something that could happen to each one of us when something out of the blue moon happens and you're just in a place where you could either become panicky or you could, as you beautifully did, like you were that observer and standing in that neutral point. And the neutral point, according to ancient wisdom or Bhagavad Gita, is called the place of sattva, which is the state of calmness where there's no thought or emotion that's bothering you. And you are, as you pointed out, it's the 0 point. Is that what you said? There's 0.
Yeah.
And it's like the neutral place where you are still in a place of stillness. And to get to that place and to answer your question, the best thing to understand, and this is something that I had recently presented in the workshop where David was also present, is that what you have control of are your words, thoughts, emotions, and your actions. And what is right now in front of us is just the present moment. Everything else is beyond our control. So if we can bring this kind of understanding, which is like, I can change my thoughts, my emotions, my words, and my actions. That's the best I can do at the present moment. And if I'm able to bring myself to the present moment, observe my thoughts, my emotions, and regulate them to a point of stillness, like you said, then you've done your job, which is like, that's all that you could do. Beyond that is panicking about it again brings us suffering or inner chaos that then again disrupts our peace. So,
Mm.
as you beautifully did, like just being able to see what is it that I can do right now, which is going to still maintain my peace and not move me into a place of chaos. So, looking at those kind of actions and moving forward is what I would advise at this point. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, beautiful.
It is funny that you mentioned that because I also have some experiences with that kind of chaos that is massive
Yeah.
here in Mexico because we have earthquakes.
Mm.
We have these alarms that are triggered every.
Yeah.
We did it on September on the anniversary of one of the biggest earthquakes that we have.
Yeah.
But now the new president changed it because she assumed that we were just attracting the energy of fear from all
Right.
the country. And then on that day, after the rehearsal or after this trigger alarm that was just to learn how to react, just a couple of hours after, there was an earthquake. And it was a big earthquake many times. So now they changed it to April, and we did it in the past month. But now the alarm is so noisy and so strong that just listening to the alarm sets you off into a triggering emotion. So you need to really step out and just don't listen to the alarm, and then take those inhaling uh,
Yeah.
breaths so that you could focus, and as you say, you can just slow the motion of things that are happening and think, what am I going to do? Because you don't know how much time you have until the earthquake is going to come. More or less, they calculate that is 1 minute, but sometimes it can be less, or sometimes it can be a little bit more, and it can be a low earthquake, a low wave, or a big one. You don't know. So
Right.
you just prepare whatever you can grab quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then what I do is that I say, if I see my lamps moving, then it means that it's strong, and then I go out. If I don't see them moving, I just stay in my home, and that's it. But there are many, many people that they just react so quickly with the sound of the alarm, and usually that's when accidents happen. Either
Mm.
someone falls, or you do something that you didn't want to. So that's what happens in our lives when we react to things without thinking, without pausing, and just letting those primitive emotions to drive us. We usually tend to damage ourselves, and many times we damage other people. No, so I think that's the best advice that you can give, both of you, Natasha and Amrita,
Yeah.
that we stay as an observer,
Right.
because if we have some time, then we can act better
Right.
than if we just quickly react to the emotion. No?
Yeah, yeah, and you said a very beautiful point, David, which is like that reaction comes as like an automatic response, right? It's something that's automatic and something that you're habituated to, right? And that's where like when we take that pause, it allows us to breathe and then take the role of the observer before you act, right? So there's you're just breaking that pattern there so that it doesn't take over you, rather you are in charge and you are guiding it forward, right? You're not allowing that emotion to just disrupt. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember something funny that happened in one game where we had this kind of experience with fireworks, but we didn't know if they were safe or not. And it was a rivalry between those two teams of American football. And one of the sisters of a friend was with us, and the moment she listened to the firework, she didn't even think about it and she jumped the fence. And we saw her outside in the field, but we didn't even notice the fastness and how much she jumped. So that's how fear can give you that energy to do something out of safety, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I have been there too. Like just a simple act which my teenager daughter does brings a lot of those kind of emotions into me, which is like she would just say something like, Mom, I'm going somewhere. And then you wouldn't hear from her at all. And then you would start like wondering, where is she? What is she doing? And all those things. And then this was kind of driving me crazy for a very long time until I had to figure out some way to kind of manage my emotions, because managing her is like the second step, but managing myself was like the first step, because I totally used to kind of end up in a place where, like, when she comes home, I would just show up that anger on her, like, why didn't you inform me, why didn't you do this and all that. But I noticed, especially when handling teenagers, it's even more a cautious stage. You have to be a little more careful to keep that relationship going strong. So thanks for mentioning that story. It reminds me of many instances with my teenage daughter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, teenage daughters. I think they come to teach us a lot about ourselves and our resilience, and how to find that inner calm and that inner chaos
Yeah.
is one of those things,
Yeah.
which I think is wonderful. If you could summarize, because I think this hour has gone by really, really quickly, and I would love to have you back
Yes.
on again for sure, because I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about. So, calming your inner chaos, what are the 3 tips that you would give anyone to calm their inner chaos?
So, the 3 tips that I would say is to first anchor yourself to the present moment. It's very important, as you both said, David and Natasha, which is like, when you're aware that you're in this place of inner chaos, you are in better control. When you're not
Mm-hmm.
aware, that's when you drive crazy, and then everything else, not an earthquake outside, but an earthquake can happen inside and disrupt the entire piece around you wherever you are. So one tip that I would say is to anchor yourself to the present moment, become aware of your inner chaos. And the next thing that I would say is to be able to take that place of the observer, which is very important. It may sound complex to begin with, because, like, how do I know which is who's my, there's like, is it my mind, is it the observer? But when you hear the inner chattering, understand that's your mind. And when you are in a place of discernment, when you're in a place where you're able to look at that situation as it is without adding judgment or assumptions to it, then you're playing the role of the observer. So step into the role of the observer once you are aware. And for awareness, as David said, you could use your breathing or even your sense organs to just bring yourself to the present moment. And once you've taken the role of the observer, the next thing is to just take that time to be able to bring this alignment between your thoughts, emotions, and your action. And the alignment will help you to actually fine tune your energy so that it's not kind of disrupted into all places. Rather, it's like in a place of alignment where you could actually use it for higher purposes. Maybe you could bring an alignment by engaging into activities which utilizes the present moment. It could be as simple
Mm-hmm.
as choosing some hobby or something that helps you to actually utilize that present moment and then utilize that energy to go in a positive direction. So I would encourage to go in that direction. Or if you have a very strong purpose or a cause that you want to support, that also can bring this alignment, because your mind, body, and spirit is actually working towards a goal or working towards something that's beyond your mind. And that kind of alignment is what I would mention as the third tip to do. And if you don't have a purpose or anything figured out, just take something that where you're able to engage yourself in the present moment. So these are the three tips that I would mention, which is presence, then taking the role of the observer, and then the third step is to align your energy with your mind, body, and spirit. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. And how can people get a hold of you if they want to connect to you one-on-one, if they need your support? How can people get a hold of you?
So they can reach out to me on my email address, which is samsarga.ca@gmail.com, or they could also visit my website, which is www.samsarga.ca, or they could also text me at my phone number 587-229-8800.
And that's a +1 on that as well.
Plus
So for
one.
those of you
That's
that are
fine.
in international
Yes.
numbers,
Yes.
it
Yeah,
was
thank
so lovely. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom and your journey with us. And what an incredible journey you've been on. And yeah, I wish you all the success in helping to bring calm to the chaos, because that is so needed these days. Absolutely. Well done, you.
Thank you
thank
so much.
thank you, Amrita, and I'm really honored that you were here. And also, you can announce your book, because I think that it's really,
Oh,
really
yes.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, totally. Yeah, you can definitely find my book, Wisdom of the Unshakable, on Amazon. And it is a practical guide to lead a life of resilience and peace. And it has insights from Holy Bhagavad Gita too, which you could apply into your day to day life to lead a holistically healthy life.
I might need to come and get a signed copy of that when I visit Calgary.
For sure, for sure.
Thank you. It was a
Beautiful.
really, really great episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And of course, we encourage you to ask questions to our guest, to reach out for her, and to ask us also questions or suggestions for any topic that you want to address, or suggest any guest that you have in mind. Thank you, and we will listen in our next episode. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.